Hey guys, I'm Chad LaChance, and I'd like to welcome you to Fishful Thinker Television. I appreciate you joining us. You've caught us this morning in the man cave right here, La Cuava del Fishful, or the lady cave as the case might be. We are here to talk to you about one of my absolute favorite ways to fish, and that's goat rope and ditch pigs. You guys are wondering what I'm talking about. No, you're not. The bassers amongst you know what I'm talking about. I'm talking about pitching heavy cover for bass. It's going to be a fun show, guys. We're going to catch fish at point blank range in heavy cover on heavy tackle. It's America's #1 most popular fish, so stay tuned, get comfortable. This is going to be fun.
Fishful Thinker Television is brought to you by Sportsman's Warehouse, America's premier outfitter. Peterson Toyota and Toyota Trucks, moving forward. St. Croix Rod, best rods on earth. Berkeley, catch more fish. Abu Garcia, for life. Camp Chef, the way to cook outdoors.
You know, the largemouth bass is the #1 most popular sport fish nationwide by a significant margin. They're a durable fish, they're a versatile fish, they're adaptable, and they just lend themselves well to angling. Well, on top of that, Ray Scott figured out back in the 60s that money could be made because people could fish competitively for largemouth bass, and it really became the birth of tournament fishing as well. Well, anytime you put money on the line, somebody's going to figure out how to catch them. And over the course of time, since the 1960s, bass fishing has evolved at a very high rate simply because people have tried to figure out how to catch them faster than the next guy. Pitching heavy cover involves heavy tackle, it involves heavy line, it involves somewhat heavy baits in a lot of cases as well. It involves accuracy, line control, and monster hook sets. After you get the hook set, then it becomes a grunting match between you and the bass and how fast you can get him out of that cover so he doesn't get you wrapped up before you get him in hand. And I can tell you this, they might be point blank range fights, but they're extremely brutal and they're extremely aggressive in terms of how bad they want to stay in the cover and how bad you as an angler want to get them out of that cover.
There you go. Got that one. Get out of there. Real big one, but it's a start.
Yeah. The fact that largemouth bass are fat and lazy is a good example of where you're going to find them. They have a real tendency to sit in and around cover of some sort. And what do I mean by cover? Cover is what gives texture to structure. Structure is the lake bed, the topography, so to speak. Cover is what is on that or sticking out from that. So overhanging cover would be trees or docks or something like that to stick out over the surface of the water, potentially grass mats or weed mats. Cover underneath the surface of the water could be weeds, could be rocks, could be stumps, flooded timber of some sort. Anything, like I said, that gives texture to the structure is key. The big thing to keep in mind is that the bass likes to sit directly in that stuff in a lot of cases, and therefore you, if you want to catch them, need to throw your baits directly in there to get them out. Let's talk a little bit about the tackle itself. In my mind, it's a medium heavy is the lightest rod we're looking at, and typically I'm going to be more in the heavy range. So my bass pitching and flipping rods are either a 7'1" medium heavy fast action St. Croix or a 7'4" heavy powered fast action St. Croix like this one right here. Those two rods do the bulk of the heavy lifting. I love Legend Extremes for this because they're extremely light, their balance is exceptional, and they're very powerful and accurate rods as well. On top of that, I throw a Revo reel in almost all situations. It's a Revo Rocket these days. The Rocket's got a 9-to-1 gear ratio. It retrieves line really quickly. Pitching heavy cover comes down to how many pitches can I make in a day. And so if I'm gonna pitch it, bounce the bait once or twice and reel it up and pitch it again, the faster I get it to me each time, the more pitches I can make in a day. The more pitches I make in a day, the more prime targets I can hit and the more fish I can catch. Now, some guys will tell you you need a lower gear ratio reel so that you have more torque. Well, I come from a saltwater background, and there is not a largemouth bass ever built that you can't overpower with this reel handle right here. It just isn't going to happen. In my mind, the speed of the reel is more important than the amount of torque it generates when it comes to fishing heavy cover. The last part of the component is the line that goes with it. I do almost all of my pitching and flipping on either 17, 20, or 25-pound Trilene 100% fluorocarbon, or 50 or 65-pound braid, Trilene braid of some sort. The reason is this: the heavy line gives you instantaneous control. It fights the abrasion from the cover as well, and it just handles well at close ranges. I throw the fluorocarbon around rock stuff or around wood cover, and I throw typically the braided line when I've got aquatic vegetation to deal with, because the braided line comes tight and cuts vegetation a lot better.
Fishful Thinker Television is brought to you by Ranger Boats, still building legends one at a time. Evinrude, spend more time on the water. Lowrance, find, navigate, dominate.
If you watch, it very commonly happens extremely quick. So you pitch, you close the bail, lift on the rod tip, and there's a fish on there immediately. And that's gonna happen because you're getting a pure reaction. You've got a fish that's lazy, he's sitting there next to a piece of cover, he's half asleep, and it's an opportunity to feed. It's an instinctive thing, and they'll grab it immediately. You have to be equally ready to set the hook immediately, because in most cases, if you don't, one of two things is gonna happen. He's either gonna spit it out before you knew he had it, or he's gonna get you wrapped up in the bushes because he's gonna dart out and grab it and then swim back to where he came from, and he's gonna have you wrapped up in the bushes. Let's talk about some specific baits that I like for pitching and flipping for bass. And basically over the last couple of years, it's come down to these three baits for me. It used to be that I almost always pitched a 5-inch Berkley Power Hog. I love the bait. It's still to this day one of my favorites. Lots of appendages, moves tons of water. It's a big bulky bait too, and keep in mind they're named for the size of their mouth, not the size of their brain. So sometimes a big bulky bait like this is a really good call. I love the Berkley Power Hog. Along the similar lines, but a smaller version, is a Berkley Pit Boss right here. And over the last couple of seasons, this thing has really come to the forefront for us. It's a little bit smaller, a little bit just overall toned down profile, but still got some appendages to move some water, and it certainly slides through cover a little bit easier than does the Power Hog. Speaking of sliding through cover, when I've got really heavy cover or really pressured bass, then I go to the Havoc Smash Tube. It's a large tube jig, but it's got a big profile to it for a tube, but it's obviously got less appendages. It's going to go right through the cover a lot cleaner. So those three do the bulk of the heavy lifting for me these days. In all of those cases, they're Texas rigged. And what do I mean by Texas rigged? Well, you've got your bait's going to ultimately look rigged something like this. The hook comes in through the nose, out through the top of the back, and is skin hooked right there. That's your basic Texas rig. The key to it is, if you look, I can slide my finger straight down this bait and it does not catch the hook. But when a bass bites it, he's gonna pop this free, it's gonna expose that hook, and it's gonna give you a chance to get a good clean hook set. Or if you jerk on that stiff rod heavy enough to where this jerks through the plastic, again, it'll pull that hook through and expose it. But it's so important that that hook be buried cleanly like that, or your bait's not gonna come through cover and you're gonna spend a whole lot of time hung up. I've got a little bullet weight right here that's 1/4 ounce. Why is that important? That's about the lightest sinker that I'm ever going to throw when it comes to pitching and flipping heavy cover for bass. Typically they're going to go from here to about 1 1/8 ounces or maybe even 1 1/4 ounces. Most of the time I'm going to be somewhere between 1/2 and 3/4 ounce. Now the flip side is this sinker will sink faster than this tube jig if it's not pegged someplace to keep it from sliding up and down the line. So in that situation, I'll either use a little pegget like this, a little rubber peg like this that I'll insert in the front of the sinker and will cause some resistance to keep it from sliding. They make little rubber bands that you can use with a bobbin threader, the same like this, so that you can pull a little piece of a rubber band through the sinker, the same thing. Or you can use a bobber stop, which is more traditionally obviously used to stop a bobber from sliding on your line, but will do the same thing for a sinker. It doesn't matter to me how you peg it, so long as that you do peg the sinker so that it will not separate very far from this bait right here, because if this gets way up here, the sinker will sink and the bait will not, and you won't catch nearly as many fish. Pitching and flipping, what we're talking about is how we're actually presenting the bait. You're going to notice in watching all these clips in today's show that I'm never going to throw the bait overhand. The most aggressive cast you might see is a roll cast off one side. Roll, keep a big swing of line and use the pendulum of the line to go. Really, most of the casts are going to be a straight underhand where I start with the lure in this hand and pitch underhand. It's all about the pendulum. It has nothing to do with loading and unloading the rod like a traditional cast. It has to do with the weight of the bait and the pendulum motion. Pitching comes down to smoothness. It's how smooth can you be with the rod, and just follow it up with the rod tip as the bait pays out, close the bail immediately, and follow your bait down with the rod. It's a very, very efficient way to present a bait in heavy cover, and if it's done correctly and your bait's rigged correctly, you'll hardly ever get snagged and lose baits.
Fishful Thinker Television is brought to you by Camp Chef, the way to cook outdoors. Peterson Toyota and Toyota Trucks, moving forward. Lowrance, find, navigate, dominate.
One of my most favorite parts of pitching and flipping for bass is that moment when you know you got a bite and you get to blast them. You know, our cameraman jokes about giving them all 7 feet. Well, what he's talking about is how hard can I blast this St. Croix to get that hook set. The key to it is you have to keep in mind this. Not only do I have to pull my hook through this plastic right here and expose it so that it will hook the fish, I also need to turn that bass so that his face is facing my direction. So when I set the hook, he needs to turn, I don't care how big he is, pointing at me so that I can pull him up and out of that cover. That's really important. So those hook sets, beyond just getting the bait buried in the face or getting the hook buried in the fish's face, it's getting that fish pointed the right direction so that you can get to the reel and get him horsed out of that cover. There is no more fun in my mind than the heavy cover hook sets of largemouth bass fishing. The other part about fishing bass around heavy cover is the fact that it's almost always done from a boat, and in my mind it needs to be done from something you can stand in. It's very difficult to fish heavy cover from a float tube or a kayak that you can't stand on, and it's very difficult to fish it from the bank as well, although I have seen a lot of cases in ponds where you can fish heavy cover fairly efficiently from the bank. Truthfully, let's be honest here, it's more often than not a boat issue, and you need to be standing in the boat to be efficient at it. Also, keep in mind that that boat is going to be very tight to the cover in a lot of situations. You don't want your boat 30 feet from the cover making long pitches. That's typically a recipe for disaster. That's how you snag more baits, it's how you lose more fish, and it's generally how you're not efficient. You want to get your boat as close as possible to your cover, but you don't want to be spooking your fish. So a light and judicious use of a trolling motor is really key. You don't want your trolling motor prop chopping up your cover on a regular basis, because the more sound that thing's putting off underwater, the less fish you're going to catch, especially when it comes to big ones. So boat control can be really important as well. It doesn't matter whether we're out in the 11-foot crawdad or the 21-foot Ranger. Boat control is really important, and getting it in and around the cover in close enough range that you can present your bait efficiently is a key part of the situation. The one thing that is hard to describe to people is how you know your bit when it comes to pitching heavy cover, because it is going to happen fast and your bait's in a very busy place. Well, for me, it comes down to watching your line more often than not. The reason that I wear my fancy Costa glasses is so I can see the line on the surface. I can see what it's doing just barely under the surface. If that line does anything different, I'm going to set the hook. Conversely, if the line doesn't sink, I'm going to set the hook. Occasionally you're going to lift on the bait, and as you lift on it, you'll feel a little extra weight, just a little heavier than it was when it just had the sinker on it. Well, that's going to be a good time to set the hook.
Like this pitch. And this is on a point right here. That's the second bite we've had, just inside of a point up against some cattails. So there's fish.
Got him. There we go. Oh, it's a horse too, guys. Look at this one.
I think we'll stick with working points with cattails on them. This is a horse right here. Look at that one.
Oh, easy fish.
Oh, buddy, here he comes. Okay, hooked right in the top of the snout. Come here, come here. Come here, open your mouth. Open your mouth. Got it. Ugh. It's a chunky one.
The bottom line is, at least in the beginning of your pitching and flipping career, you need to set the hook early and often, and you'll figure out that you're gonna get more bites than what you realize. It really comes down to, can I detect them and get the hook sets? Occasionally, you're gonna go ahead and set the hook. There's gonna be nobody there. You might snag your cover, or your bait's gonna come flying back at you, but that's okay. That's how you're gonna learn to be better at it.
No, it's not a fish either, it's a rock.
More than just about any other kind of casting, I think practicing pitching is very, very important. And the reason is this: it's the most accuracy intensive type of fishing you can do. Hitting a 3-foot circle is not accurate when you're talking about pitching. I'm talking about hitting a 4-inch circle, a little inside of a coffee cup or something like that. The more accurate you can be and the more consistent you can be and the quieter you can make your bait hit the water, the more fish you're going to catch without question. So keep that in mind as well. Practicing is easy. Put a small target out in the yard, stand on something that's ever so slightly elevated and pitch away. If you've got tall enough ceilings, pitch in your living room. You don't need a lot of space for it. We're not trying to throw 50 feet. We're trying to throw 15 feet very, very accurately, so keep that in mind as well.
Up into the back where that fish just bit effortlessly without thinking anything about it, and got it back, which is important as well.
That, especially on a lake like that, is so crucial. When you've got this cover like this, I mean, you've got to put it in there where the fish are, and if you're not putting it in there, a lot of times you won't catch them.
Right, and they ain't gonna come out to get it.
So it's pretty easy to say, okay, we need to go pitch and flip heavy cover to catch bass. But what cover are we looking for? Well, in my case, it very often comes down to either a mix of cover types or isolated cover. Isolated cover is a single standalone tree or stump, or a single rock that's bigger than the other stumps around it, or one dock that's separated from all the other docks. In other words, something that provides a prime piece of cover that's not completely surrounded by other stuff. That can be a really good call. Even more consistent than that, only because there's more of it, is mixes of cover types. When I say a mix, what am I talking about? Well, maybe it's pole timber surrounded by bushes of some sort, or a laydown that's laying in some buckbrush, or some kind of brush that's flooded like that. The other possibility is a mix of different kinds of grass. Maybe you've got a whole bunch of hydrilla, and then right over here is some coontail that's mixed with it, or you got some lily pads that are growing over the top of it, where I've got two different kinds of grass coming together. Or even it could be different kinds of rock, where I've got a whole bunch of rock and like a rock dam, and there's one log sticking out off it that floated up there. That's going to be a prime spot to catch bass. But the bottom line is I'm looking for something slightly different than everything around it, and if it is all the same, I'm looking for the biggest pieces. In my experience, it's been that the biggest bass will sit on the most prominent pieces of cover, and if you remove that bass, one of his buddies will move in right behind him.
Fishful Thinker Television is brought to you by Sportsman's Warehouse, America's premier outfitter. St. Croix Rod, best rods on earth. Camp Chef, the way to cook outdoors.
There's two modes of thought when addressing a large piece of cover. Is, do I fish the edges first and then work my way to the middle? I disagree with that. How I like to go about it is I want to sneak up on it as quietly as possible and put my bait in what I consider to be the most prime spot. And here's why. I want to catch the biggest fish in that piece of cover, and I suspect you do as well. Well, if I truly believe that he sits in the heavy part, and maybe the crook in the tree, or right at the base of the tree trunk, or where two limbs come together in the tree, whatever the case might be, that's where I'm going to pitch first, because I want to surprise the biggest one first. If I start hunting, pecking my way around a big tree, and I pick 2 or 3 small fish off around the outside of it, or even if I don't, but my bait comes bombing in around it, the fish that's in the middle of that cover, in other words, the one I'm predicting is going to be the biggest, is going to know I'm there. And then when my bait finally lands on him, he may or may not bite it. Whereas if I sneak up real quietly and make 1 or 2 really good pitches to the heart of the cover, I got the best chance of getting him to bite and putting him in the boat.
Right in the notch. Drop it right in the hole. There's no water depth right there at all, so we're staying way back off of it. Come on, that should get eaten. But because I know there's a notch there, I know that limb comes off this way too. Fish? Got him. All right, there we go. Figured we'd get one out of there. That's every bit of 10+ feet deep right there. Fish. Got him. Got him. Big one. Big one. Yeah, there we go. Finally got a decent one. I figured there'd be one in that tree. There we go. There you go. There you go. So that's why you fish the isolated cover, guys.
And of course, you and I would agree that we would love to maximize our catch ratio.
Sure.
And if they're hitting a horizontal bait.
There's one. That's a big one
that's
there.
A nice one there. Whoa.
Yeah, he's not as big as he looked, but he's on that horizontal. I think you called that one right, Kurt.
You know, he was. He
the
was right.
horizontal. I thought he's bigger than that. Boom! Got that one. There you go. I watched him come out and eat it, and I think he liked Iconelli's tube. Stuck right there. Ta-da! So our dissolved top water pattern that went away when the wind started blowing. We have made good adjustments. You know, we've caught just about as many fish pitching baits, and he got a big one too, don't you?
I don't know if it's a big one, but no, it's not that big, but
No, it's a good catch.
it's exciting though.
You got him. That's a nice one, dude.
Yeah,
and
not
he
too
was on
bad.
that single
He
bush
was
out
on
there
this
by
single
himself.
laydown right here. I was looking over there and I could just see it under the water, and felt like I'd make a cast to it.
And I
Pretty
wonder
fish.
why. So now we've gotten 2 species on one spot. What do you like about this spot, Curtis?
Well, you know, you got all kinds of laydowns. It's a nice little inlet type of bay, not an inlet, but a little indentation type of bay, and one bush.
Well,
And that bush is right on the edge, right on the drop off, right on the edge of the cover. There ought to be a fish in there. Oh, nice one.
there we go.
Nice.
There we go.
Like you said, shallow or deep?
Shallow
This one
or
is shallow.
deep? Yep. I'm just gonna hold him right here. Come out from underneath the boat.
That's a beauty.
And
Into the
get
boat.
up in here.
All right.
There
nice
we
one.
go, Bubba. Look at that, right in the top snoot, not coming off. That's a thick, chunky. I think it's safe to say we've made some decent adjustments.
So there you have it, guys. Pitching heavy cover for bass. It's one of America's most favorite ways to fish, and it's certainly my favorite way to fish. So hopefully you guys have enjoyed this show. Get your heavy tackle out, get the goat rope out, get the Texas rig baits out, get some practice, get your accuracy and line control under control, and go and catch some fish. It's a really fun way to fish, and you can do it from just about anywhere you can see this show. So we appreciate you guys watching very much. If you'd like to join the conversation, please do so on Facebook, Instagram, or Twitter. We would absolutely love to see your own heavy cover bass. We appreciate you watching, and we'll see you next week.
Time now for today's best catch, brought to you by Berkeley.
I like this pitch. And this is on a point right here. That's the second bite we've had, just inside of a point up against some cattails. So there's fish. Got him. Ugh. He's a chunky one.
Berkeley, catch more fish.
Fish right here. Oh, I missed him. Fish, 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 fish. Got him. Oh, no, it's not. Got him. Oh, it's not a fish. Oh, no, missed. I was too late. Oh, fish? No, that was not a fish. Got him. Oh. Oh, come on, dude. No, it's not a fish either. It's a rock. Okay, cut, cut, cut.